Imagine someone puts $1 million in front of you today and tells you that you will never have to work again. There is no catch, no debt attached to it, and no hidden condition waiting somewhere in the fine print. The money is yours, and from this moment forward, you are completely free to decide how you spend your time. Most people would take the deal immediately, but now change one number. Instead of $1 million, imagine they put $500,000 in front of you and give you the exact same promise. You will never have to work again. Would you believe them? Probably not, because somewhere along the way, most of us develop the idea that financial freedom has a specific price tag attached to it. Maybe it's $1 million, maybe it's $5 million, or maybe you've convinced yourself that you would need $10 million before you could ever walk away from a paycheck. But there is a problem with that way of thinking. There is no universal number that makes someone financially free. The amount you need depends on something much more personal than your income, your job title, or the size of your bank account. It depends on how much your life actually costs. And once you understand that, the question changes completely. Instead of asking, how much money do I need to become rich? You start asking a much more useful question. How little could I actually need before working becomes a choice instead of a requirement? And that question is where the story gets interesting. Let's say there's a man named Michael. He's 41 years old, lives in the United States, has a solid career, and earns around $140,000 a year. From the outside, Michael looks like he's doing pretty well. He has a comfortable home, a reliable vehicle, takes a vacation every year, eats at good restaurants, and doesn't usually have to worry about whether he can afford his basic needs. But Michael has never done one simple calculation. He has never figured out exactly how much his life costs. Then one weekend, he decides to find out. He opens his bank statements and starts going through everything he spent over the last few months. His mortgage is there, along with insurance, groceries, utilities, transportation, healthcare, restaurants, entertainment, subscriptions, and all the smaller expenses that seem harmless individually but become significant when they're added together. When he finishes, the number surprises him. Michael is spending roughly $7,000 every month. That's about $84,000 a year. And suddenly, he sees his financial situation differently. Michael makes good money, but if his paycheck disappeared tomorrow, his lifestyle would still demand $84,000 every year. The mortgage wouldn't disappear. The insurance company wouldn't care. The grocery bill wouldn't stop. His monthly obligations would continue exactly as they were before. Michael realizes that he isn't financially free. He's financially dependent on maintaining his income. Those are two very different things. So, Michael runs the calculation again, but this time he separates the things he genuinely values from the things he simply became accustomed to paying for. He doesn't decide to live like a monk, and he doesn't cut every enjoyable part of his life. He simply asks himself which expenses actually make his life better and which ones exist because his income gave him permission to stop thinking about them. The expensive dinners become less frequent. Some subscriptions disappear. A few unnecessary upgrades stop happening. He realizes he doesn't need the newest version of everything, and he doesn't need to spend money simply because he has it available. When he's finished, Michael discovers that he could live a comfortable life for around $4,500 a month. That's $54,000 a year. He hasn't earned an extra dollar. He hasn't started a business. He hasn't bought an investment. He hasn't received a promotion, but he has just lowered the annual cost of his freedom from $84,000 to $54,000. That's a difference of $30,000 every single year. And this is the part that most people overlook when they talk about becoming wealthy. The less your life requires, the less your future has to produce. Now imagine two people who both earn $100,000 a year. The first person spends around $90,000 to maintain their lifestyle, while the second person lives comfortably on $55,000 and uses the difference to build savings, business ownership, and productive assets. Who is closer to financial independence? At first glance, you might say the person earning $100,000, but they both earn exactly the same amount. The difference is what happens after the money arrives. One person turns most of their income into lifestyle, while the other turns a larger portion of their income into future options. That's why a high income doesn't automatically create financial freedom. Your income determines how quickly you can build. Your lifestyle determines how much you need to build. And if your lifestyle keeps expanding every time your income increases, you can spend your entire career earning more money without ever feeling like you have enough. Michael understands this now, but he also discovers something else. Reducing expenses is only half the equation. He can make his life cheaper, but eventually he needs to build something that can produce value without requiring every dollar to come directly from his salary. So he starts small. He keeps his job and begins building a service business on the side using skills he already has and working on it during the hours he would normally spend scrolling through his phone or watching television. The first few months are nothing impressive. He makes a few $100s here and there, and some months he barely makes anything after expenses. But he keeps improving the offer, finding customers, and learning how to operate the business more efficiently. Eventually, the business begins producing around $2,000 a month in profit. That's roughly $24,000 a year. Michael still needs his job, but now something important has changed. Before, almost all of his financial survival depended on one employer. Now, part of his lifestyle is supported by something he owns and operates himself. He hasn't reached financial independence, but he's no longer starting from zero. And that's what the beginning of financial freedom actually looks like. It isn't always a giant bank balance. Sometimes it's simply becoming less dependent than you were last year. But then, Michael runs into one of the biggest traps in personal finance. His income starts increasing, and with it comes the temptation to make his lifestyle more expensive. He starts thinking about a larger house, a newer truck, more expensive vacations, better restaurants, and all the things that suddenly seem reasonable because he can technically afford them. And this is where people quietly make a terrible mistake. They receive a raise and immediately create a new monthly obligation. Then another raise arrives and they upgrade something else. Eventually, the person who earns twice as much as they did 5 years ago discovers that they also need twice as much money just to maintain their normal life. Their income increased, their lifestyle increased, but their freedom barely moved. They didn't use their higher income to buy freedom. They used it to buy a more expensive version of dependence. There is nothing wrong with enjoying your money, and financial freedom isn't about refusing to spend or living an unnecessarily miserable life. The real goal is to make sure every increase in lifestyle is a conscious decision rather than an automatic reaction to earning more. Because once a new expense becomes permanent, your future has to keep paying for it. That's why Michael changes the question he asks whenever his income increases. He stops asking, "What can I afford now?" Instead, he asks, "What can I own now that could make me less dependent later?" Maybe that's a business. Maybe it's ownership in a productive company through a genuinely Sharia-compliant structure. Maybe it's a digital product, a service business, or another productive asset. The exact strategy can vary, but the principle remains the same. You're trying to build things that create legitimate economic value rather than relying entirely on selling your personal time. And if keeping your finances interest-free is important to you, the details matter. Something shouldn't be considered acceptable simply because someone puts the words halal or interest-free on the label. You have to look at the underlying business, the contract, the risks, and how the actual profit is generated, because the structure matters more than the marketing. Now imagine Michael 5 years from today. He isn't a billionaire, he doesn't own a mansion, and he isn't posting screenshots of a 7-figure portfolio on social media. But his life looks completely different. His expenses are under control. He has a strong emergency reserve. His business produces consistent profit. He owns productive assets. And most importantly, his entire future is no longer dependent on one employer continuing to send him a paycheck. He still works. And that's something people often misunderstand about financial freedom. The goal isn't necessarily to wake up one morning and decide that you will never work another day in your life. Maybe you enjoy your work. Maybe you want to build a company. Maybe you want to create something, teach, invest, or solve problems. The real goal is to reach the point where you can do those things because you choose to, rather than because missing one paycheck would put your entire life at risk. That's a completely different relationship with work. You can leave a terrible job without panicking. You can take time away when your family needs you. You can spend a year building a business that might not pay you immediately. You can say no to opportunities that don't align with your values. And sometimes the most valuable thing money can buy isn't a luxury car or a bigger house. It's the ability to say no without fear. So forget the question of whether you need $1 million, $5 million, or $10 million to stop working. Start with a much simpler calculation. Look at your actual spending over the last 3 months and figure out what your life really costs when you remove the expenses you don't genuinely value. Then multiply that monthly number by 12. That's your annual lifestyle cost. From there, ask yourself a different question. What would I need to build, own, or create so that this life no longer depends entirely on my paycheck? Maybe your number is higher than you expected. Maybe it's lower, but at least it will be your number, based on your life, rather than somebody else's definition of wealth. And remember, you don't necessarily need to become extremely rich to become financially independent. You need to become least dependent on one employer, least dependent on one paycheck, least dependent on constantly increasing your lifestyle, and eventually least dependent on trading every hour of your life for money. Because the real goal was never, I never want to work again. The real goal is much more valuable. I never want to be forced to work again. And when you finally reach that point, the money hasn't simply made you richer. It has given you something you can never earn back. Your choice.